In this video, we are going to be talking about some players who were respected, then either completely ruined their legacy or career and is now a meme, or someone who was good, but unfortunate events happened to leave a sour taste in everyone's mouths. We are not using ending bad in the sense of someone like Aspire. Overwatch Criminals is for a different day. Our first player started his career way back in the Apex days in 2017 on a team that was horrendously bad called Flash Lux. But Fleta played so well, he was the only threat they had to offer. The word on the street was just shut down Fleta and you win. So naturally, with words like this being tossed around, he's going to be hyped up to all hell when Overwatch League was announced. I mean, having a statistic named after you based on how good your performances were is something not even the best players of all time have. The Fleta deadlift means you have 50% of your team's final blows. That's the level of carry Fleta did for Flashlux. His initial Overwatch League year on Seoul Dynasty was good when he actually got to play. Seoul kept subbing him out for whatever reason, so we didn't really get to see the performances everyone expected to its full potential. Seoul overall was disappointing, similar to Dallas Fuel. Viewers were so excited to see these two teams at the beginning, but they fell short in comparison to expectations. But years later, Fleta joined the Shanghai Dragons, where he finally started coming into form, being praised for his intelligence of the game and being so flexible. He was a progenitor of how to play Echo, being great on Tracer, Mei, literally whatever you put him on. Fleta got his MVP in 2020, Roll Star, and #1 seed in the regular season, unfortunately falling short in the playoffs. 2021, the guy was still the same beast from 2020, playing his expected heroes and hitscan at times. He seemed to have it all. Aiding in one of the most dominant seasons of all time, Shanghai Dragons was an unchained beast in 2021, essentially earning a guaranteed chip. Fleta got another Roll Star and another MVP candidacy. So people had a lot of respect for him, you know? Having back-to-back #1 regular season seed, 4 tournament wins, MVP, 2 Roll Stars, and a championship, that is an ass load of success within a 2-year span. We ran down Fleta quick, but I want to get you in the spot of understanding how he was honestly starting to build himself a true legacy. If he got Roll Star a few more times, maybe won another chip, possibly people could be saying he's a GOAT candidate. It wouldn't be some PGE GOAT shit, just pure raw dog, look at Fleta's success, he is a monster of Overwatch. But it appears something changed from 2021 to 2022. There was a noticeable decrease in his performance. Sometimes he seemed to be daydreaming about what he ate last week rather than playing the game. Of course, the narrative of Fleta being a worthless, horrible, trash can player and Shanghai Dragons were the worst team ever in 2022 was overblown. They won a tournament, they were second seed in APAC, so clearly they weren't that bad. There were obviously teams that were worse, even in North America. I mean, sure, in comparison to Shanghai and Fleta's previous seasons, I get it, they were worse in that sense, but the people weren't entirely wrong about Fleta. It's no secret he did struggle individually, getting exposed a lot more, not really getting as much value as he once did. Now, whether this has to do with him actually struggling or focusing more on Valorant, not entirely sure. There were rumors going around about Fleta swapping to Valorant instead of playing Overwatch, which, you know, like, fair enough. If he doesn't have the passion to play Overwatch anymore, he shouldn't be spending his time with it. Just move on to something else that he enjoys and actually has passion for. His 2022 season was sort of a stain on the Fleta is meta legacy, but surely people would just look past it. Almost all the best players have had years that weren't great. Kevster in the second half of 2023 and Proper in the same year. It can't always be perfect. Not everyone can be Chipsa with a 100% win rate and establish themselves as a slab of iron in the competitive Overwatch ecosystem. Obviously, I'm not trying to compare Fleta and Proper. Like, in his case, Fleta was starting to phase out. He just wasn't a top player anymore, just an average flex DPS. But if he ended after this year, people would still look fondly on him. You can look over a rough patch. In 2023, Shanghai sold and dropped all of their players. We expected them to go budget since NetEase is the company who owns Shanghai Dragons, and they refused to renew that licensing agreement in China, so obviously they don't want to spend any more money on this game. As teams were revealing rosters, we saw Fleta get announced to the Dragons once again, and we were like, oh, that's cool, he's still got his head in the game. I guess him swapping to Valorant was just purely a rumor, and he wants to continue his Overwatch grind. But we all missed it at first. Once we took another look, like what's this little thing right here? This shield? Everyone thought there is no way he is actually doing this. Fleta is not going to actually become a tank. Look, in theory, it could have worked. I mean, the guy was always praised for his intelligence of the game throughout his most successful years. If you got him to play Sigma, Orisa, Doom, like heroes that are not Winston or Rhine, basically ones that don't require you to stand up against the 7,000-hour warlords, he might be okay. But as we saw the meta go in the direction of Winston, you kind of had to play it, and right off the rip, everyone had the honor to see Fleta Winston battle it out against Guxue, where Shanghai just didn't have a chance. This roster for the whole year did not have a chance against anyone, really. Fleta's Winston was so bad, it was genuinely one of the worst performances of all time. The connection from himself to his team was non-existent. Viper did try his darndest to win, putting out good performances, but with Fleta Winston and Gangnam Jin main support, you're not getting out of bottom 2 jail. Once people witnessed the glory of Fleta tank, everyone asked, did Moon even trial him? It's a genuine question. Did Moon actually trial Fleta for tank? There's no way he did. It had to be nepotism. You're telling me there's not a single actual tank player they could have signed, like 2U or Marvel? You know, there were tank players in contenders that deserved this spot and would have performed better. These said tank players whooped Shanghai Dragon's ass when they played against each other. Obviously, Fleta was swapped out mid-season. Even Moon couldn't take watching it anymore. Fate came back where the team was still bad, but looked better than they did with Fleta playing. Before 2023, Fleta was honestly one of those guys. He had great performances, MVP, role star, and actual champion. The whole reputation was burned away after this tank move. Now, I don't think anyone has confirmed the real reason this signing even transpired, but most people chalk it down to nepotism. Nobody could convince a soul that Fleta was actually trialed. But whatever the choice and reasoning was, this is all people remember now. It completely burned down what he made for himself. He's starting to have this amazing legacy. Fleta has a stat named after him. He was really damn good in the earlier days of Overwatch, and especially to the end of Overwatch 1. Lots of people respected him. But the only thing newer players will know is that his Winston is a meme now, and it's something we should never need to taint our eyes with again. And I think Fleta has the biggest player fall off in Overwatch period. A literal champion and MVP to a piece of dog shit. Our next player is someone I just mentioned with Fleta, another person who was actually really good, but it's not like that anymore. Gangnam Jin started his career in 2020 on Florida Mayhem, coming from Runaway. The professional hustler runner sold Yaki and Gangnam Jin for ludicrous amounts of money, but both of them were quite successful in contenders, so surely somebody would inevitably pick them up, and both impressed almost immediately. Gangnam Jin was a really good flex support. Of course, he wasn't Alarm or Violet, but he was a flex support anyone would want on their team. Everything seemed to click so well for everyone on Mayhem, even getting to a stage finals against the Shock. Florida had their first ever good season. Gangnam Jin individually had a really good year, and people hoped to see more of him in the future, so it made sense to why Florida kept him for 2021, essentially trying to build on their good pieces, where once again they had a really good start to the season. Gargoyle, BQB, Yaki, and Gangnam Jin were performing very similar to the year before, making it to the May Melee playoffs, where they ended up placing third. After this first stage was over though, I don't really know what happened. June Joust was awful for Florida. This team just didn't understand the meta, going 1-3, and sadly the rest of the season everything just fell apart. Florida went into the OGE trap unfortunately, where he ended up taking a break partway through the year, and Checkmate came in for tank play. They did almost beat Dallas Fuel, but got exposed afterwards since Checkmate's tank was horrendous, but it was still fun to watch though. He just didn't give a fuck. Even though Florida was kind of ass for the rest of the season, Gangnam Jin, BQB, and Yaki were all good on their respective roles. It just seemed like there was no leadership or direction in game, and those players were just trying to win on their own. They ended 10th in North America, going 5-11, A third place in 2020 down to bottom 3 the following year is quite the drastic shift, but sadly for Gangnam Jin, it gets even worse. After this year was over, Gangnam Jin was known as a capable flex support player. Again, not the best on earth, but still someone who could fit in just fine on an average or above average team. Even though Florida got rid of him, most people expected him to go onto another roster because he was clearly good enough to be in Overwatch League, but unfortunately the team he went to was New York Excelsior. This was one of those teams that fell into the early narrative of thinking Overwatch 2 would be dominated by double flex support, where teams neglected how Lucio existed and he is the only hero with a speed boost. Like, how could that be helpful, right? This double flex support power obviously was not the case, and teams like this were stuck with 2 flex supports, Myeonbong and Gangnam Jin, where one of them needed to play Lucio, and Gangnam Jin ended up being the one who did it, and it was really bad. He would usually play very disconnected from his teams and have awful beat timings, in general abhorrent misplays because he's new to the role, and it was a massive green thumb for New York Excelsior. Their backline was horrendous, which actually was shocking since Myeonbong did have some potential when he was on Boston Uprising. He just underperformed egregiously, and Gangnam Jin was stuck in Lucio jail, becoming a laughingstock when previously he was a genuinely good flex support. Adding insult to injury, we actually got to see a peak Gangnam Jin moment against Dallas Fuel, where he farmed the ever-living shit out of this team on Zen, carrying NYXL in some of those maps because of how much impact he had. There was a clear showing of that talent again, only if he had a main support player alongside him and let him play the heroes that he's actually good at. Well, our wish was half granted. NYXL actually signed another Lucio player on a 30-day contract, Ansunjae, and to put into perspective how bad Gangnam Jin's Lucio was, Ansunjae was playing on 180 ping from Korea in the middle of the night, and his performances were better. Unfortunately, this signing didn't cause a massive shift. Of course, it made them look a little bit better, but towards the end of 2022 was when this signing happened, and it seemed everyone from New York was completely boomed and lost the passion to put their best foot forward, and most felt this NYXL roster shouldn't have been as bad as it was, finishing out 4-20 at 12th North American seed. That's quite pathetic, honestly, for the player quality, but for Gangnam Jin, after seeing his performances on Lucio and Brig, you'd think the world learned its lesson. We don't need it, we don't want it, he's just not suited for the role and won't be signed again as a main support, right? Well, Shanghai Dragons felt a little bit differently from the community in 2023, initially having DM on support, who then got replaced by LR15. So this means that Gangnam Jin is going to be playing Lucio again. After what we saw on NYXL, there is no way we live in the real world, but he was there. He got signed. I get it from the Gangnam Jin standpoint, as we said with Fleta in 2023, with how bad Overwatch League was getting when it comes to signing and being cheap as shit. You're not going to decline a league offer, even if it's minimum, if you just want the money. But during his Shanghai year, it was exactly the same thing as 2022 NYXL. Whenever Gangnam Jin played Lucio or Brig, it was rancid, absolutely disgusting, zero improvement whatsoever. Like, is this really the best you guys could do? I mean, Sanguinar exists. He was in contenders. It was a perfect signing for Lucio. There's no way Gangnam Jin was the best option. It's really sad to see a player who had this fantastic opening to his career, showing great mechanical skill. His Ana, Zen, and Baptiste during both 2020 and 2021 was really promising. The little bits he played it in 2022, he genuinely still looked good, but ended up being stuck in Lucio jail when he was clearly awful at it and shouldn't have been in that position. Gangnam Jin was an up-and-coming talent that got flushed right down the toilet, so it's quite depressing to see that, and most don't even remember he was genuinely a good flex support. All people think about now is how awful his Lucio is when you say the word Gangnam Jin. Our next player is someone who had lots of potential, so much hype behind him, but never really got a chance to flourish into the animal he was promised to be. Fissure joined Overwatch League in the very beginning during 2018 on London Spitfire, but didn't really get people's eyes on him until he joined the LA Gladiators shortly into the season, where he got loads of praise. Some were even calling him the best main tank in Overwatch League, and for this time period, he probably was. The guy could seemingly play everything you need, he's very reliable, always showed up and had great performances against the best. Everything was fine until something happened, which I never found a definitive answer to. Most boil it down to him being toxic due to the wording Gladiators put in their post for playoffs, straight up saying, Fissure will not be playing in match 1 of playoffs. The Gladiators believe the most effective practice and preparation is necessary in order to perform well in playoffs, which in between the lines is basically saying Fissure was causing a disruption of some sort to the Gladiators behind the scenes. Maybe it was due to the roster being mixed. Some Korean players in the scene have had problems with that, even if they are great players. They just don't like the language barrier. And Fissure was obviously insanely good. Whether he was toxic or not, the guy was a front-running MVP candidate right next to Carpe and Jonak. Regardless of what happened behind the scenes, it was a disappointing end to a great start of Fissure's career. I doubt Gladiators would have been able to beat London in playoffs even if he played, but it would have been nice to see him there. After the end of 2018, Fissure was obviously not going to fizzle out of the scene. Orgs will throw money at him because he was an MVP candidate. And for 2019, Fissure went to Seoul Dynasty. And obviously people tore their shirts off in excitement considering how disappointing they were in 2018 compared to the original hype levels, but adding someone as good as Fissure was a perfect start to having a season that would live up to the Dynasty promise. Stage 1 of 2019 was a decent run from Seoul. They looked pretty good at GOATs, obviously nowhere near Vancouver or Shock, but they improved enough to beat NYXL during the Stage 1 playoffs, who most people seem to forget was a really good team during 2019. Seoul beating NYXL was a massive upset. Getting 4th in a tournament was a great turnout for Seoul, and it seemed this roster was on a path to become good, but Fissure just didn't play again after the first match in Stage 2, just permabenched. Speculation started immediately to why this is, why the almost MVP guy is being benched by Marvin. Obviously, everyone's minds went straight to him being toxic because of the whole Gladiator situation, which the actual reasoning for either of these things have never been publicized, so there's no reason to delve into something that only insiders would know. All we can do is look at it from a viewer's perspective, and it was quite sad to see. It's not to say Marvin was a bad player, but surely Fissure would be a much better fit for the team due to everyone knowing how good he was and the fact that Seoul just upset NYXL and got 4th in the previous stage. It was just a really strange thing to see, and then Fissure ended up retiring partway through the season and giving the Overwatch community and Overwatch League establishment a parting gift by leaking 222 Rollock coming to the game and the upcoming Stage 4. I'm not really sure why he would do this. There's obviously going to be some sort of repercussion for that. You'd assume this would burn bridges with people and make you look untrustworthy, but he retired and he said he had no passion to play the game anymore. So in the moment, he just probably didn't care he wasn't going to play again until miraculously his passion came back. My assumption is because of the team he got an offer from for 2020, the Vancouver Titans, 2019's Grand Finals runner-up, a fantastic roster of players. Success was in the cards. Everyone felt Fissure had the capability to fit on a roster of this caliber. He would be the only main tank, so no subouts, an entire year of Fissure. After he got his $3,000 fine for leaking Rollock the day after his signing, Fissure got to grinding, ready for 2020 to begin, giving a great opening match of a 3-2 victory against Gladiators, then another victory against Valiant, 3-0. Vancouver had a 2-0 start to the year, and then it happened. The beginning of the end for Vancouver Titans. Vancouver got absolutely stomped in their final 2 matches against Guangzhou and Chengdu, but as most are aware, there were a lot of internal problems when 2020 began between the players and management. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details since our focus is just on Fissure, but to put it simply, Vancouver was not complying to the players' needs when it comes to living conditions and various other things before and after the pandemic started. The players were told to go back to South Korea since the Titans facility supposedly couldn't accommodate to the pandemic guidelines, which some of the players obviously did not want to do. After everyone on Titans returned to Korea, management just essentially ghosted them all since their translator didn't even work during South Korea's time zone, nor nor did they want to pay anyone in Korea to do it. They were all stuck playing at home. Hacksaw wasn't even set up, which is why he didn't play in either of the final 2 APAC matches, and the only real communication the players got from the Titans org was only 1 day in advance, telling them that these matches were going to be happening, explaining the stomp, because there was actually no time to prepare for these matches. It was an awful situation that ended with these players being miserable and splitting apart from the Titans. There is just so much to this whole rabbit hole here that we're not even touching on, and it's probably one of the worst behind the scenes moments in Overwatch history. Most of these players did go to other rosters, but it appeared after Fissure was dropped from this team, he retired for good. It really sucks we didn't get to see Fissure play for an entire season after 2018, where he was really good. No one is going to get a top MVP candidacy for nothing. On Seoul, he had a good stage 1, and then never played again. Why? Not entirely sure. Was it because of him losing passion, or maybe him being benched forced the passion to go away? Was it toxicity? The latter? Nothing has come out publicly, and then he retires mid-season. He comes back for 2020, wanting to compete again. Then all this stuff happens with the Titans, where he ends up retiring again and stayed in it till this day. Fissure is probably one of the largest what-ifs in Overwatch history. Like, how would 2020 Vancouver perform if they didn't implode with Fissure as main tank? What if Fissure played for Seoul all year instead of being benched in 2019? Would he have actually became an MVP, or at least gotten a couple of role stars? Sadly, we will never know the answer. Those were a few players who had pretty bad ends to their careers. Fleta, Gangnamjin, and Fissure were all amazing players at one point in time, but I guess things change, not always for the better. If you have any other players who fall into the same sad circle, make sure to leave a comment about them below. Thank you for watching to the end. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and check out my playlist here that has a bunch of other videos on professional players. There's a couple of them in there. Please watch them, I beg.